I was being asked personal questions that had nothing to do with golf. That was the deal, and I realized I'd better adjust quickly. This was my new life as a professional.
Hello there, and
there were plenty
welcome
of perks,
to the golf club.
such as the Nike deal that I'd signed.
Let's go ahead and play some
flying
golf.
on private airplanes, and 10 years later, flying in my own airplane. But more than anything, I loved golf and competing. I needed to cope with the magnifying glass trained on me all the time. I found it stifling at times, but as Arnold Palmer told me, the attention was going to be there, and it would be unrelenting. If the glare was magnified that much more at the Masters, how would I perform? I didn't play well at all. Not at the start, anyway. I shot that 40, and I was bewildered and furious as I walked to the 10th tee. I was trying to think about what had just happened. I needed to figure out what went so wrong on the front nine. Security guards, and beyond them patrons, as Augusta National prefers to refer to spectators at the Masters, flanked me as I walked. I decided that my backswing got too long on the front nine, and I didn't like that feeling. I didn't like it when my backswing even got to parallel. I got out of sync. Then I had to get back on the right path to the ball by using my arms alone rather than allowing my lower body to carry them through. Swinging that way meant I had to depend on my timing, which wasn't reliable. I wanted my swing to feel tight. This provided me the control I craved. But by control, I didn't mean that I wasn't swinging freely. I could make an uninhibited swing at my best without mechanical thoughts. I wanted that feeling. Maybe as a golfer, I lived for it, especially when it mattered the most.
Well, at least you're out of the
when
sand.
I had to produce
For
a swing
the
that
bird.
wins. I had learned as a young golfer that I wanted to be in a position where my winning depended on my making the shot when I needed to, rather than winning because another player made a mistake. The feeling of coming through was intoxicating. 20 years later, as I think about that walk and the issue with my backswing, I know that there was so much more than technique involved. I was looking for the feelings I had in my swing only the Friday of the week before the Masters, when, with my friend and fellow professional Mark O'Mara, I had shot 59 at the Isleworth Golf and Country Club in Orlando. I lived there, and so did Marco. I took a cart and listened to music while I went along. We started on the back nine. I played one 9-hole stretch in 10 under par and took a few bucks off him. My swing felt fluid from start to finish. The game felt easy. Along the way, in mid-afternoon, we had quite a surprise. On the third hole, a par 5, we hit our drives around
Even
the corner.
after the first
I
hole.
teed off and was going to hit a 3-iron into the par 5. I looked around the corner and saw a white plume.
Let's let her rip.
The Space Shuttle Columbia had just launched from the Kennedy Space Center. We saw the whole thing, and it was chilling. I'd just moved to Isleworth and had never seen the shuttle. We sat in our carts and watched as the booster came off to where there wasn't any exhaust. I'd been interested in the space program since I was a kid, and I often read about NASA's missions. Sitting there in the cart, I was in awe. Just to think, scientists were making this happen. What an accomplishment. There I was, playing golf, while 7 astronauts had just taken off in a space shuttle that, I would learn later, weighed 259,000 pounds and would reach an apogee of 188 miles, the point in its orbit that the satellite would be the farthest from the center of the Earth. I like reading about science, and suddenly we had come across the shuttle.
You can't hit all the fairways.
I felt both small by comparison to space travel and in awe of what man could achieve. I felt exhilarated sitting there. We played again the next day. I shot 32 on the front nine, birdied the 10th hole, and made a hole-in-one on the 11th. Marco didn't say a word after the hole-in-one. Suddenly, he drove off in his cart. Huh? I thought. I assumed he had just had enough. It was his way of saying, this is crazy. You shoot 59, and now you make a hole-in-one. I'm out of here. I followed in my cart. Something else happened in the weeks before the Masters that helped my confidence. Arnold Palmer had invited me to play at the Bay Hill Club and Lodge, which he owned. I'd admired Arnold for years, especially his attacking, go-for-broke attitude and the way he managed to not only cope
Here's a pro
with all
tip.
the attention his
Try
game
staying out
and
of
friendly
the rough.
nature brought him,
It'll help, trust
but
me.
to welcome it. I'd sought him out for advice on these matters, and he was always willing to sit down to talk with me. Before I turned pro, I picked his brain about the world of professional golf, what it takes to get there and succeed, and how to handle the attention that comes with the sport. He was a great mentor as I was entering the new world of professional golf. At Bay Hill, in what was called the Shootout, Arnold, who was then 67, played with his buddies every day at noon.
Great contact.
This time, I was there, playing with him in a group, and it was exciting. We had a match for $100, and I closed him out on the 17th hole.
Okay, we're putting from 29 feet out.
Arnold being Arnold, he wasn't about to say we shouldn't have another wager on the last hole. So, we played the 18th for double or nothing. I was miles by him after our drives after hitting 3-wood. He hit driver, even though the second shot is one of the most dangerous shots in golf because of the way the green wraps around the lake in front, and he finished in the back bunker. I then hit 8-iron to the green. Arnold got up and down for par. I missed my birdie putt, and so we halved the hole. That was pure Arnold. He had no give-up in him. He believed it was possible to turn things around, whatever the circumstances. Maybe one of the best examples of his attitude came in the 1960 Masters, when he birdied the last 2 holes to win by a shot over Ken Venturi. He knew he had to birdie the holes because Venturi was already finished.
Third hole coming up.
I was fortunate to get to know Arnold before I turned professional. Eventually, I won the Arnold Palmer Invitational at Bay Hill 8 times, and it was a thrill to see him waiting behind the 18th green where he waited to congratulate the winner. I was sad when he died on September 25th, 2016, and I thought of all those times behind the 18th green. Arnold meant so much to the game, and I'll never forget our friendship and his counsel to me over the years. Looking back, I know that he fired me up the week before the Masters. Then at Augusta, after the match with Arnold and shooting 59 at Isleworth the next day, I played practice rounds with Mo. I called Mark O'Mara Marco, Mo, Mark. I also played 9 holes with Seve Ballesteros and Jose Maria Olazabal on the Monday of Masters Week. Seve, a 2-time Masters champion, had the best hands in the game, and Ali, as everybody called him, was also a short game master. Seve showed me a variety of shots around Augusta's complicated greens. I wanted to learn from the best, from former Masters winners. That was why I made sure to play practice rounds at Augusta with Seve and Ali, and with other winners, such as Nicklaus, Palmer, Raymond Floyd, and Fred Couples. The first round was approaching, and while I was confident in my swing, my putting was off. Still, I'd never have believed I would shoot 40 on the front side. I was having a problem with my speed, and speed determines line. I couldn't feel comfortable on the greens during practice, and I couldn't make any headway. The night before the opening round, I decided to ask my father, Earl, for his advice. Nobody knew me better than Pop, but he wasn't well. He had had a quadruple bypass in the 1980s, and then had to go back into the hospital while I was playing the Tour Championship in Atlanta at the end of the 1996 season. I couldn't concentrate after spending the night in the hospital with my father, worrying about him, and I shot 78 in the second round. He then had a triple bypass only a month and a half before the Masters. I flew out from Orlando to see him at the UCLA hospital.
Coming up.
Watching the monitor beside his bed, I saw that Pop had flatlined. He told me later that in that moment, he had felt a surge of warmth and felt he was walking into the light. But he decided he didn't want to go to the light. All I felt was warmth, he told me. Do I go to the warmth or not? I made a conscious decision not to go to the warmth. He survived,
Looks like
but his
he'll be in the
doctor
short stuff
didn't want
here.
him traveling to the Masters. He didn't want him to fly. Pop said, "Screw that. I'm going to watch my son."
All right,
He flew
and
to
we are
Augusta
about
on Tuesday of
160
Masters
yards or so.
He was
from
staying in
pin.
the same house with me, as was our custom. He had no energy. He was with it half the time, and half the time he seemed dazed and fell asleep frequently. Now, the evening before the first round, he was in bed. I needed help. I grabbed 3 balls and got into my putting posture as he lay there in bed, and I asked him if he saw anything. He did, and told me, "Your hands are too low. Lift them up. Get that little arch in your hands, like you always do." I had to adjust my left-hand position and my posture to accommodate the change. This meant that my forward press on the putter was different, but I knew Pop was right. I made the modifications he suggested and tightened my left-hand grip. Now I felt ready for the opening round. But I still shot 40, and I'd putted well to do that. My putting wasn't the problem. Pop had solved that. But my feel wasn't there. I was upset that I'd made so many bad swings, and worse, that the feel of a good swing had deserted me. I was hot inside.
Back on the fairway, out of that
just
rough.
Before I stepped on the 10th tee,
on the green.
I let go of that anger and calmed myself. I was thinking of the feeling I had the week before at Isleworth, when I hit one perfect shot after another. The feeling washed over me. My heart rate slowed. I felt the motion of my swing and the tightness I wanted. The sense of controlled power through the ball. I felt free. There were 63 holes left in the Masters, as my caddy Mike Fluff Cowan reminded me while we walked to the 10th tee. I relinquished the forced, conscious control I had inadvertently exerted over my swing and game on the front 9. That was no way to play, to really play golf. I needed the freedom that comes with playing. By playing, I mean I didn't need to force things or to overthink the swing. I was executing the old idea that you can't think and swing at the same time. It was calming to have Fluff at my side. He had caddied for Peter Jacobsen for 18 years and was with him for 6 wins.
And that takes you up to even par.
And had to withdraw from the PGA Championship the previous August. He was going to take time off.
Coming off a bit of a bogey on that last hole. Let's see if we can do better here.
I called Peter for permission to ask Fluff to caddy for me. He said that was fine. And so I called Fluff on my way back from winning the U.S. Amateur to ask if he would caddy for me. Fluff being Fluff, he made sure I knew that his work with me might last only until Peter was healthy enough to tee it up again. I admired his sense of loyalty. Fluff was nearing 50, and he was the original free spirit. I had never met somebody so into the Grateful Dead. He was a Deadhead and had been to many of the band's concerts. We hadn't talked much about the Dead since he started caddying for me when I turned pro. What did I know about the band? And anyway, I wasn't interested. Their music wasn't my music. I was into hip-hop. But I did appreciate Fluff's laid-back demeanor and that very little on the course got to him. He'd caddied for me in all 3 tournaments I had won on tour. In addition to the 2 I had won in 1996, I won the Mercedes Championships to start 1997, and he always seemed to know what to say. He was a psychologist as much as a caddy, simply by being himself. He helped settle me down with his go-with-the-flow approach. The last thing I needed as I went from 9 to 10 was tension in the air because of my lousy play on the front 9. Tension and Fluff didn't go together. Now I was on the 10th tee. I pulled the 2-iron out of my bag. Fluff liked the choice of club. I blistered the 2-iron down the fairway. There.
And
right there,
that'll keep you at even par. Nice.
That was the feeling I had at Isleworth. My pace picked up as I walked to my ball.
Okay, here we go.
And from a perfect position in the fairway, I hit an 8-iron within 15 feet of the hole and made the birdie putt. Okay, this is it, I told myself. I'll be fine. I knew it from that one swing on the 10th tee. Sometimes in golf, everything can turn around for better or worse with one swing. This was the swing that was going to turn it around for me. I was playing a very short course for me, and I'd made my Isleworth 59 swing. Here we go.
Solid swing.
I didn't miss a shot the rest of the way. After making birdie on 10, I pitched in from just over the green on the par 3 12th for birdie.
Okay,
I
about
birdied the par 5
yards
13th,
out.
eagled the par 5 15th, then birdied the 17th hole. I was into it and was hitting the ball long and where I wanted to hit it. I hit pitching wedge into the 15th to set up the eagle. I was dialed in. My birdie on 17 came after I hit a lob wedge from 87 yards right over the top of the flag to 12 feet from the hole. My birdie putt on 18 to shoot 29 on the back nine slid just past the right edge. So I shot a 6-under par 30
I think you're heading into the
on the
cabbage
backside.
on this one.
40, 30, 70. 3 shots out of the lead. There was still plenty of light. I went to the practice range to ingrain the feel of the swing I made on the back nine for the second round. My swing coach, Butch Harmon, accompanied me as I followed one sweet shot with another. Neither Fluff nor Butchie, which was how I usually referred to him, needed to say much. I was okay. Chapter 2. Amateur Days at the Masters. My first significant Masters memory was from 1986, when I was 10 years old and Jack Nicklaus was making a run toward his 6th green jacket. My dad and I had played 9 holes on the morning of the last round, which had become our annual routine.
Okay, it's time to send this ball on its way.
I was watching the last round on television with my parents soon after Jack started the back nine. He began the final round tied for 9th, 4 shots behind Greg Norman, and was even for the day until he birdied the 9th. No big deal. He wasn't really in contention. But then he birdied the 10th and 11th holes before making bogey on the 12th. His move appeared stalled, except that this was Jack Nicklaus. He birdied the 13th, parred 14, and hit his drive to the top of the hill on 15. That was where his presence registered with me. Jack was at the top of the hill, looking down at the green over the pond in front, and his son, Jackie Jr., was caddying for him. Jack asked his son, "How far do you think a 3 would go here?" Jackie thought he was asking how far he would hit a 3-iron. But Jack was asking his son what he thought an Eagle 3 would do for him in terms of where he stood in the tournament. Jack was 4 shots behind Seve Ballesteros at the time. Jackie handed his dad a 4-iron on 15, and Jack hit a perfect shot over the water in front of the green that finished 12 feet from the hole. What I remember about this is the way Jack reacted to the shot. He raised his arms after the ball stopped on the green with his fists in the air. Kind of little fist pumps.
Yes.
Nothing over the top. Still, I wondered why he was reacting that way.
For the round.
He'd hit the shot he wanted, but the hole wasn't over. His reaction made no sense to me as a 10-year-old.
All right, let's let her rip.
I was baffled that you would react that way when the hole wasn't done. I could compare it to a pitcher who has just thrown his 2 best fastballs. It's an 0-2 count, and he's showing how pleased he is. But the at-bat wasn't over. The pitcher hasn't struck out the batter. Jack hadn't finished the hole. But of course, Jack made his eagle putt on the 15th, walking it in as the ball neared the hole. In 2016, at the Champions Dinner that takes place every Tuesday night of Masters Week, I was sitting with Jack and Arnold. It was neat. 14 green jackets next to each other. Jack had 6, Arnold had won 4, and I'd won 4. I was talking to Jack about the 30th anniversary of his win in 1986, and I asked him, "Jack, do you realize what my highlight of the week was?" He said, "I have no idea. What was that?" I told him I'd seen him do something I'd never seen anyone do in golf.
This is the danger zone.
He asked what I meant. Well, I said, "You celebrated on 15 after your second shot with both fists up in the air. I got that you hit exactly the shot you wanted and gave yourself a chance to make eagle, but I'd never seen anyone celebrate before they'd finished the hole. The hole wasn't done." I asked Jack why he was celebrating. Jack didn't really give me an answer, but he did tell me about the circumstances of the shot and the question he had asked Jackie about how far a 3 would go there. I laughed and said, "Jack, I've heard that story a bunch of times, but celebrating before the hole was over? I'd never seen that and didn't understand it while watching as a 10-year-old.
19-foot putt from here.
It was a few years after 1986 before I had more understanding of the game and could begin to see why Jack would react like he did. He felt the moment and the situation. He did what he needed to do to put himself in position to win the Masters. He wasn't thinking about winning. He was thinking only about that shot and what he needed to do. He wasn't getting ahead of himself, which can easily happen. Jack, after he made eagle on 15, then hit a 5-iron within 3 feet of the hole on the 16th and made that putt to get to 8 under for the tournament.
Yes.
He left himself a birdie putt of 10 feet on the 17th green.
2 under for
and
the round.
And he reacted as the ball approached the center of the hole. His left heel came up, and his right hand came off the grip.
Okay, next stop, fairway.
He was staring at the ball and stepped forward as it was about to fall. His left hand and arm came straight up while his right arm was at his side, straight down. As the ball fell, Jack's mouth was wide open as CBS's Vern Lundquist, unknown to Jack at the time but legendary since, proclaimed, "Yes, sir!" The hole was over. Jack had gotten to 9 under, which is where he finished after he tapped in for par on the last hole. His reactions over those last holes of the 1986 Masters made an impression on me because they were spontaneous, and they showed me how much of yourself you have to put into a shot. Harvey Penick said you have to believe the shot you're about to play is the most important thing in the world at that moment. It's just a golf shot, true, but at that moment, it's more important than breathing. But you have to be so involved in it that nothing can penetrate your concentration. If the shot comes off, you might react in a way that you wouldn't have expected, or that will surprise you when you think about it. Along these lines, I think of my reaction when I holed a 25-foot birdie putt on the 18th green the last day to win the 2008 Arnold Palmer Invitational at Bay Hill by a shot over Bart Bryant. When the ball fell, I whipped my cap off my head with my right hand and flung it on the ground. I flung it. Hard. I had no recollection of doing that and didn't know where my cap was. You can't script such a reaction. Jack's reaction there on 15 at the 86 Masters has stayed with me because I learned something watching him that Sunday afternoon. The game can bring intense satisfaction, and it's worth working as hard as you can to maybe put yourself into a situation where everything depends on you hitting the right shot.
Put some decent club on that.
Jack was 46,
fairway bunker,
and I was only 10, and I couldn't put it into words then, but I wanted to be where he was and doing what he was doing. By the time I watched the 1986 Masters, I'd been playing real golf for 6 or 7 years. By real golf, I mean counting my score in a tournament. I finished second in a pitch, putt, and drive, an early version, I suppose, of Augusta National's Drive, Chip, and Putt Championship that started qualifying tournaments in 2013 for the 2014 Masters.
Par on this putt.
It brings kids who qualify to the club for the finals on the Sunday before the Masters. At the tournament I played, I won a trophy that was almost as big as I was. I thought that was the neatest thing ever. That was hardly my first exposure to golf, though. We were living in Cypress, a city of about 40,000 people in Southern California. It was a mostly white, middle-class neighborhood. Some of the residents weren't happy that a mixed-race family had moved in and threw things at the house: lemons, limes, rocks. Dad had 2 sons and a daughter from a first marriage, and they told me about the incident. My half-brothers, Kevin and Earl Jr., went over to the house where the people who took exception to our moving in lived, knocked on the door, and had a little discussion to clear up the situation.
Very solid round after 9.
They didn't throw rocks at the house anymore. Pop had served 2 tours of duty in the U.S. Army in Vietnam.
Of a bogey on that
he was
last
a Green
hole.
Beret,
Let's see if we can do
and
better
he was
here.
one tough man. Pop had met Mom when he was on an information assignment where she was working. They married and first lived in Brooklyn, where he was a lieutenant colonel stationed at Fort Hamilton. Pop was invited to play a game of golf, and he liked it immediately because it provided such a challenge. He was a skilled baseball player, and he loved that sport. But golf gave him another outlet. When he and Mom moved to Cyprus, he was able to play at the Navy golf course. My mother, Tita, hadn't been in the United States very long after moving here from Thailand. In Thailand, there's not much, if any, of a melting pot. And now that she was living in the U.S., she quickly saw a side of American culture that was hurtful.
Tree got in the way on that one.
She never forgot that such treatment was possible. She toughened up. Mom was, and still is, strong and feisty. As we said in our family, My mom was the hand, and my dad was the voice. I could negotiate with him, but not with my mom. There was no middle ground with Mom. You were right, or you were wrong. She would tell me that I had to be home 5 minutes before the streetlights came on in front of our house. If I was 1 second late, that meant 1 day of restrictions. No going to the park for me. I didn't always get the message, or I should say, I ignored it, and so the restrictions continued for me every time I messed up. It was my responsibility to get home in time. If not, I knew what was coming. Earlier at home, my dad set up a practice area in the garage, and he sat me down in a high chair to watch him hit balls into a net.
All right.
I was only
out of
9
the dirty
months old.
stuff into the short stuff
Although
here.
I don't remember my dad hitting balls
I'd
there.
say it's about 120
Apparently, I didn't
yards
take
or
my
so to the
eyes
pin
off
from here.
Something about the contact between the club face and the ball, or the thwack when the ball hit the net, must have appealed to me. I do remember putting in the garage for hours as I got a bit older. Pop had put down the worst-looking and worn carpet on the floor, but it had what I would call lanes that were the same width as the head of a putter. I wanted to make sure that my putter moved away from the ball and inside the lane, then back to where I would hit the ball, and then moved inside and away from the lane again.
Very long
that was the start of what I like to think of as a stroke that resembled Ben Crenshaw's. Inside the line going back, through the line at impact, then back inside the line. I've never wanted to take the putter straight back and straight through. That made no sense to me, because the shaft of a putter is on an angle. It's not straight up, 90 degrees from the ball. A pendulum stroke is fine if you're perfectly 90 degrees vertical. But what putter's like that? If the shaft is on an arc, then the stroke should also be on an arc. The putter swings, it's a stroke. But it's also a swing. Subconsciously, I learned that in the garage on the ratty piece of carpet. The colors were almost blinding, yellow, green, and orange. It was putrid. My dad never used it, but I putted for hours on it. I putted to music by Run DMC. Their sound and the beat fired me up. I still listen to them to this day. My dad was a big fan of classical jazz, though. He wasn't too thrilled with hip-hop. His music was John Coltrane, Miles Davis, and Charlie Parker. When he followed me in tournaments, he would often take a break on his seat stick and listen to jazz tapes on his Walkman. Sometimes he fell asleep. If I passed his way again, or if he caught up to me, he knew right away how I had been doing by the way I was walking and the look on my face. I had so many good times with my dad on the course when I was a kid. My parents were really good at encouraging me in the game without pushing me or making me feel bad when I played poorly. My job was to try my best. The results didn't matter because I would learn from it whether it was a good result or not. I was lucky that way. My mom drove me to all my junior tournaments throughout Southern California before I got my license. The courses were often an hour or more away. My responsibility was to make sure we got to the course on time. I learned how to read a map, what time we should leave, how long it would take us to get to the course, and what the alternate routes were. If we weren't early, we were late because I had to warm up. Mom walked every hole with me and kept score. We talked about the round on the way home, when I didn't fall asleep, that is. My nature on the course was to get into my little world. My dad was different when we played. He didn't take up golf until he was 42, yet he got down around a scratch handicap. The game fascinated him, but he wasn't going to subdue his nature to play it. Pop was outgoing and talked all the time while playing. That was just who he was.
Okay, that performance is going to put you up
I could talk
even
all
par.
day if I wanted to, but I learned early that I played my best golf when I cut off any conversation and got zoned in for the shot.
Last hole. Let's see if we can do better here.
I like to be on the course with my dad. Often only the two of us. It was peaceful when we played on the Navy course in the evening. All these years later, I can see the trees on the course. I remember them from when I played there, especially a tree on the right at one spot. It was a 9-iron for me to get there, and it became a wedge when I grew up a bit. When I got out of school, I would arrive at the course in the evening. We didn't have a whole lot of time to get some golf in, and very little during the winter. Nevertheless,
and that'll
those
keep you at
evenings to
1
me
under
were
for the
connected
round.
to golfing with my dad. Early on, I had to sneak onto the course because you weren't allowed on it until you were 10 years old. I did notice that white kids under 10 played, but
11.
I wasn't allowed to mix with them. Anyway, I wanted to be out there with Pop, and if I had to sneak onto the course, so be it. I did that starting when I was 4 years old. My mom dropped me off. I hopped into a ditch and scrambled to the other side. The clubhouse was up above, which meant no one could see me. My dad got a cart. I walked out past the first hole and past the second, and I laid down under the bridge on the third hole. I was trying to be in total disguise so I could blend into the environment. To do that, I put rocks and vegetation around me when I snuck on. I hid my golf bag under the rocks, and then I'd hear my dad in his cart. "Hey, you there?" "Yep, coming up." As I think back, I would have played in the dark. That's how much I loved those times I spent with my dad. I liked playing other sports as well, including baseball, football, and basketball just for fun, although I was always competitive. I also enjoyed cycling and skateboarding, but something had to give. So as I started junior high, Mom and Pop told me I had to choose one sport. Golf was obviously special to me given how much time I wanted to spend practicing and playing. My mom told me, and she meant it, that I couldn't play until I did my homework. That didn't leave time for the other sports in my life, so I chose to focus on golf. I didn't interact much with kids on the course during casual rounds, although I played with them in tournaments. Whatever racism I felt,
from here.
and it was there, I learned early to let my clubs do the talking, as my mom had always advised me. She taught me to be strong, and that the more I said, the worse the situation would be. If I was going to let my clubs do the talking, Mom said, I might as well beat the other guys by as many shots as I could. There was a difference between winning and beating. I wanted to win, sure, but I also wanted to win by as many shots as possible. My mom liked me to stomp on the other players, to use her word. I started to become what my dad called an assassin on the course. I developed that attitude at an early age without intending to. It was just who I was. The more pressure there was in a tournament, the more I had to make a shot to keep a match going, or to win a match or a tournament, the calmer I felt. As I started to play more tournaments and make my way in junior golf, I thirsted for that moment. I'm sure Nicklaus did as well. He wanted the shot when it mattered most. Tom Weiskopf once said something very revealing about Nicklaus's state of mind. Jack was coming up the final hole of a tournament when Tom said, Jack has the presence of mind to make the right decision when all around him players are getting confused and panicky. Jack was calmer and more locked in the more a tournament was on the line. I'm not sure that can be taught, but I do know it's where you want to be when a tournament is hanging in the balance. Maybe that's intimidation. I don't know.
Solid approach.
I'm just glad I've always wanted to have to make the shot. After watching Jack win the 86 Masters, I made sure I watched the tournament every year. Something dramatic seemed to happen year after year. In 1987, Larry Mize holed a long pitch and run from right of the 11th green and 140 feet from the hole to win a playoff over Greg Norman. The ball ran and ran pretty much on a straight line to the hole. You can't play the shot that way now, though. Augusta National raised a portion of the green there, so you have to play a different shot. The contours of Augusta's greens are complicated,
Sitting
which I
at
enjoy.
2 under for the round.
You could play a lot of different shots from around the greens back in 1997. You had options.
Okay, it's time to send
Bobby
this ball
Jones and
on its
Alistair
way.
McKenzie designed Augusta National as an inland links, modeled after the old course at St. Andrews, although they look so different from one another. A links allows the golfer to use the ground, rather than forcing only one shot. The high ball meant to fly a specific distance, land on the green, and stop within a few feet. You have to do that on most American courses because water and sand often intervene between the player and the green. This takes away from the creativity that makes golf so much fun. Augusta in '97 played like the inland links the designers intended. They designed it to force you to create shots around the greens. There was no rough. You had all the mounds and the options of bumping the ball. When I first played the course in the 1995 Masters, the greens and tees were close to each other, like at a links. That's not the case as much anymore because they've lengthened so many of the holes and moved tees. I've loved links golf since the first time I saw it in person when I played the 1995 Scottish Open at Carnoustie. I played the Open Championship the following week at the Old Course. Those 2 weeks provided a strong introduction to links golf. I made the cut at both tournaments, although my finishes were poor. I was 47th in the Scottish and 68th in the Open. But it was more important that I discovered links golf and I could see the relationship between the type of golf you wanted to play there and the type you wanted to play at Augusta, especially if Augusta was firm during the Masters so that you could use the slopes in the fairways and on the greens. At the 1995 Masters, months before I'd played the Scottish Open at Carnoustie, I often had the option of creating shots on the ground to play links-like golf on an inland course. The only difference was that I was playing on bent grass and the greens were running at 13 on the stimp meter, the device where a ball is placed on an inclined plane and allowed to roll down to the green. If the ball rolled out to 13 feet, then the stimp measurement was said to be 13. Bent, running at 13 on the stimp, was different from the fescue or meadow grasses on a links, where the greens couldn't be as fast in case it got very windy. Strategic golf appealed to me, although I enjoyed and even thrived in amateur golf on the excitement that came when I was required to hit one shot and one shot only over water, and you'd better do it now, as Jack had to do on that 15th hole in the last day of the 1986 Masters. I just never wanted that kind of golf as a steady diet. I found too much of it boring. It didn't ask a golfer to imagine and create shots. It didn't generate confusion in a player's mind. There was one choice: the air ball. The golf on the ground that Augusta offered, especially into and around the greens, appealed to me even when I was a kid. I'm not sure why, because I grew up playing a lot of courses where the idea was to fly the ball all the way to the hole, the air game. But I enjoyed the creativity you could put into shots on the ground, the shots you could invent. Also, Augusta gave you a chance if you weren't in a good situation. It gave you an opportunity to bail out. But if you did bail out, you'd have one of the hardest pitches on the planet. Mize's shot was a good example of that. Nicklaus's 4-iron to the 15th in '86, on the other hand, was the perfect example of golf in the air. Augusta National demanded both. Every year, when I was a kid watching the Masters telecast, I got more excited about the possibility of my playing the tournament one day. Even though some members had invited me, I didn't want to play the course until I qualified for the tournament. I didn't want to go until I'd earned my way in. Then, 9 years after watching Jack win that 1986 Masters, I was about to get my chance. I qualified for the 1995 Masters because I'd won the U.S. Amateur the year before. I was 19, and nobody would have referred to me as sentimental about golf. I'd developed a respect for the course and the Masters, but I would never refer to it as a cathedral in the pines, the term you hear every April. I did enjoy reading golf history, and I had studied the Masters, but I didn't think the history of the place would overwhelm me. I wanted to go there to compete. Finally, that moment arrived. My introduction to Augusta National came when I entered the club from Washington Road, the main street running through the city, and onto Magnolia Lane. I don't know what I expected, but I was underwhelmed. It was a quick drive of about 300 yards, framed by magnolia trees whose branches hung over the road. I was surprised by how short the drive was, only about the length of the range that we used then. I thought from watching the tournament on television that Magnolia Lane was much longer and that it went up a hill to the clubhouse. Or maybe I was underwhelmed because the club had excluded black golfers from playing for so long. 20 years had passed since Lee Elder became the first African-American to be invited to play the Masters. That was 41 years since the first Masters, and Charlie Sifford, for one, ought to have been invited because he had won on the PGA Tour, but never was. My dad said a couple of days later that Magnolia Lane didn't impress a black golfer because of this history. I'd grown up hearing about the history, along with learning that the Masters was the most popular tournament in the world. I had wanted to compete in the Masters ever since I got serious about golf. All of this was probably playing on my mind as we drove down Magnolia Lane. I had complicated feelings. But most of all, I was eager to get to the clubhouse and onto the course for my first round at Augusta National. It was Sunday evening, about 7.
Okay, we're
I'd driven
sitting
to
at
Augusta
around
National with my
110
Stanford
yards
teammate and
to
close
the pin.
friend Nota Begay, after we played a couple of college tournaments in Atlanta and Dalton, Georgia. Nobody was at the club except for the receptionist. She showed me up to my room in the crow's nest. I settled in, then went to the practice green with Nota. He wasn't playing in the Masters, but it was good to have a pal with me. We hit some putts, and then went back into the clubhouse to get something to eat.
Looks like you're going to hit some sand
I got
here.
lost finding my way back and ended up in the Champions locker room after using the wrong door. That was my first experience of the Champions room. I looked in and saw all the lockers. Sam Snead, Jack Nicklaus, Arnold Palmer, Billy Casper, and Gene Sarazen. All the Masters champions. I'd read about these champions and been impressed, but seeing their names on the lockers made an immediate and deep impression on me. I yearned to get my name on a locker. Of course, I wasn't even allowed in there because I hadn't earned my way in. I'd have to win the Masters to be there legitimately. I returned to the crow's nest, which felt like a frat house to me during my stay. It's all single beds and open
and that'll
with
keep
little
you at
dividers.
1 under for the round.
There was one phone to share so everybody could hear what conversations you were having. I didn't have a cell phone then.
15th hole coming
Hardly
up.
anybody did. And certainly none of us in the crow's nest had one. I was sharing the crow's nest with Trip Keeney, Tim Jackson, Guy Yamamoto, and Lee James. Trip was the 94 U.S. amateur finalist and the guy I beat to win the AM. We both qualified for the Masters off those finishes. Tim was the U.S. mid-amateur champion, Guy had won the U.S. Public Links, and Lee had won the 94 British Amateur.
Looking good.
Tripp and Lee were 22, Guy was in his mid-30s, and Tim in his late 30s. After an unusually long night's sleep Sunday, I got up and was ready to play Augusta National. Well, maybe not quite ready in the sense of being prepared, but I was eager to get on the course. I'd also watched previous Masters that my parents had taped, and at Stanford, I practiced putting at Maples Pavilion on the hardwood floor of the volleyball court. I showed up there, putter in hand. I got a lot of laughs, but I didn't care.
Brilliant.
I hit a lot of 40-foot putts, just touching the ball,
2 under
trying
for
to
the
put
round.
a soft stroke on it. One thing was certain, I didn't want to tighten my grip and lose any feel.
Nice solid
I played
birdie
my
on that
first
last
practice
hole.
round
We
with
got
Lee
another
James
birdie in
and
the
Nick
works
Faldo,
here.
who'd won in 1989 and 1990, and who had more control of the ball than anybody at the time. He was a precision player. My father walked along, and so did Ron Townsend and Bill Sims. They were the first 2 black members at Augusta National. Townsend, then the president of the Gannett Television Group, was invited to join in 1990, while Sims, who owned a 5% stake in the Carolina Panthers, became a member 4 years later. Tommy Bennett, a local guy and veteran caddy, was on my bag.
You can't hit all the fairways.
His nickname was Burnt Biscuits. Ward Clayton, in his book about Augusta's caddies, wrote that Tommy turned over a pot of boiling water that was on the stove as he tried to escape out the kitchen window from his grandmother's home with some biscuits, but he burned his legs with the hot water. He was popular enough around Augusta that there was a fading mural of him on the front brick wall of the Sand Hill Grill. It showed him wearing the Augusta National white overalls and a green Masters cap. I visited the grill during the week to get some local knowledge from the caddies, for whom it was a hangout. He carried my black leather bag with some gold stitching from the 1994 World Amateur Team Championship in Versailles, which the United States won. Out on the course, Faldo was intense, and while I might have liked to question him about his strategy as we played, it was apparent that he wanted to mostly keep to himself. That was okay with me. I was a kid. He was the veteran and 2-time Masters champion who went on to win a 3rd Masters in 1996.
From rough to
Lee and I were more talkative because we were contemporaries.
That
he was 3 years older than I was, but he was also playing in his first Masters, and we were both staying in the crow's nest. We enjoyed the round and went our separate ways. I wasn't prepared for what happened next. The media were waiting under the massive oak tree on the lawn at the back of the clubhouse that serves as a gathering place for media, players, and Masters visitors who have access there. I passed it on my way to the clubhouse, as all players did. They stopped if anybody wanted to interview them, I made the mistake of walking right past the media.
All right, we're in the first
because
cut
I had
here.
decided I didn't want to be
Chip
distracted.
this bad boy on the green.
Besides, I was going to do a press conference on Tuesday. It didn't occur to me that I would need to speak with the media after my first practice round. I thought I had a decent relationship with the media coming into the Masters. I'd spent time with them while winning amateur tournaments and had become accustomed to mass press conferences. The first one I did was when I was 16 at the LA Open. Why couldn't the media wait until the Tuesday press conference at Augusta? But I was wrong. I should have stopped. I'd won 3 straight U.S. Juniors and then the '94 U.S. Amateur, and the media had started to take a lot of interest. I soon realized that print, radio, and television journalists were going to want to talk to me after every round during practice or the tournament, and no matter what I shot. Rookie mistake, I guess. I went inside the clubhouse and had lunch with Tripp. He and I had played one another in the final match of the 1994 U.S. Amateur at the TPC Stadium course at Sawgrass. I was 6 down to Tripp after 13 holes in the morning and 3 down with 9 holes to play in the afternoon round. But I came back to win my first U.S. Amateur. I went out with Tripp for a second practice round Monday at Augusta. We played a $5 match and I nipped him on the last hole to win. My Tuesday practice round was with Greg Norman, Fred Couples, and Ray Floyd. Freddie and Raymond were former Masters champions. I wanted to learn from the guys who not only knew the course, but who had won, or come close, as Norman had. I asked questions nonstop. What do you do here? What do you do there?
Nice putt.
I'm sure they got tired of me, but this was history. I had the chance to tap into history.
So that's going to keep you at 2 under for the round.
The pin was on the right side of the second green, and I wanted to know the best way to get to it.
Let's hope for some fairway.
Raymond said, "You see those people over there?" He was pointing to the people right of the green. He told me to hit my second right at them. I said, "What? You don't try to funnel it in off the slope? You don't go for the green on your second shot after a good drive?" Raymond was showing me what he would sometimes do. He was shorter than I was off the tee. The 2 bunkers on the right didn't exist for me. But Raymond played left of them. He wanted to show me an unusual route to give myself the best chance for a birdie if I did happen to drive it short one day and couldn't get to the green with my second shot. Raymond said, just hit it over to the right or hit it into the people and hit it into number 3 in front of the tee and then pitch back up. I asked, why would you do that? He told me to go down there and have a look. I walked over, asked some of the spectators to move, and threw a few balls down. From there, I could see exactly why Raymond intentionally hit his second shot so far right sometimes. He had the entire green to work with on his third shot and was pitching it uphill. The ball wouldn't run out because of that.
Now that was a swing.
You weren't at the mercy of the hill. I pitched it back up the hill and I saw, yeah, this is a pretty easy shot, even to a left flag.
All right, you're putting cool. Now.
So I said,
all right,
nice.
14 feet
it's
to
really
the
nice
hole.
Down there and the angle is good to pitch up the hill. The way Raymond played the second shot didn't compute for me unless for some reason I couldn't get to the green. But the idea made sense. Augusta lengthened the hole a few years later, and I did try the shot he suggested. I would never have seen that shot if he hadn't pointed it out to me. That was the advantage of practicing with guys who had a lot of experience at Augusta. It was good of them to play with me and show me around. There's a reason only one golfer, Fuzzy Zeller, has won the Masters in his first time there in modern times. It takes time to understand the nuances of the course. Raymond taught me a few other little shots around Augusta, different cuts and spins.
Send this ball away.
We were using the old balata ball, which made those types of shots easier. I learned how the guys would hook little chips and cut them, how to kill the speed into this slope, to use that slope. Essentially, I learned about the different shots and clubs they used and the options that they had. There were so many more options around the greens back then. Augusta has changed dramatically since those days, when we used a ball with much more spin, and there were much tighter conditions around the greens. You had more shots. These guys knew them all.
Okay, so you're in the rough here.
That Tuesday, I did my press conference. I said that I was trying to treat the Masters like any other tournament. My thinking was that the game was the same as in college golf or any other pro event, even if the spotlight was so much brighter on the Masters than the tournaments I'd played while I was at Stanford. I didn't mean to offend anybody. I was being honest, but I learned that I had offended some of the media, and I got ripped. The Masters was a major, and the first one every year.
Well, looks
when I was
like
asked
this
whether
may
I
be
was
in the
thrilled
deep
to be
stuff.
at Augusta, I said yes, I was thrilled. But my primary
skipping
focus
a
was
jump
on my
to the green
game
from
and
here.
not the atmosphere. That didn't go over too well. My deal was that I entered every tournament, no matter what it was, to win. I wasn't about to get distracted and overwhelmed by a place or its history. I had read about the Masters, and I knew plenty about its history. I felt I could talk about it with anybody, and I'd be glad to do that. But after the tournament, I wanted to focus only on my game and the shots I needed to play. I felt that way at every tournament. The Masters was no different. That was just the way I felt. I was being honest, but I sensed a tense atmosphere in the media center. When I was asked why golfers seemed to know more about the history of our sport than other athletes did of theirs,
let's see what you
answered,
can do with his 8-footer.
Why? Hell if I know. I honestly can't answer that because I really don't know. Why do we? My answers to some of the questions weren't going over well. I was also asked what I thought about the fact that I was only the fourth black to play in the Masters, after Lee Elder in 1975, followed by Jim Thorpe and Cal Peete. Have you encountered any problems? A reporter asked. I answered, I have not encountered any problem, except for the speed of the greens. I was well aware of Augusta's history before 19